Welcome to another episode of Big Cash Breakthrough, your gateway to digital wealth. Please welcome Augusto Lara, founder of Hashed, a dynamic services company that aids startups in launching products centered around analytics, blockchain, and AI. Hashed has successfully developed dozens of products, serving thousands of users across various sectors. Augusto is also a key member of the Smart Vaults team, which focuses on creating secure and recoverable taproot mini-script self-custody solutions. Recently, Hashed achieved a significant milestone by winning a parachain slot in the Polkadot ecosystem in 2023, marking a major achievement in their blockchain endeavors. Welcome, Augusto.
Hey, Jun, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, yeah, I always ask people, how did your crypto journey begin? When did you first hear about Bitcoin or any other crypto?
It started with a co-founder from Hash called Max. He's very experienced in Bitcoin and other chains, but he started because we used to do analytics only, and he started to explain the value proposition of Bitcoin and then immutability. And as we started to get more and more into the topic, it seemed like there were some problems that you could only solve with on-chain data.
No, that's okay. So you got in from more the business side. Someone, your co-founder was learned about crypto. So what was it about blockchain that you mentioned that from a business standpoint that you thought would make this technology much different than other technologies you've used? And maybe give the audience some background about what types of software you developed before then. You said maybe analytics, I think you mentioned.
Yeah. So before we used to do a lot of BI, it's reports, ETL, a lot of data processing, reporting. We also did applications like iOS and Android apps. Yeah, when we started to look at blockchain, I remember like a tagline that stick to me. It was the Internet of Money, right? And the moment you read the Bitcoin white paper, there's a lot of clicks, and you start to go into the rabbit hole, and I think a lot of things start to make sense. But one of them was this ability to have data that is hosted decentralized in a decentralized way, and like the ability to trust in data that no one can manipulate made sense for some use cases. At the beginning, we talked a lot about logistics, of course, money. And then, yeah, we started working in different projects. I think at the beginning, I think we got there a little early, not as early as some, but maybe 2000, I say 2007, we started working on some of these projects. And yeah, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm about tokens and how can you create money and how can you handle inflation and some other use cases like traceability. We explore a lot of use cases. And yeah, we built some cool products for customers that wanted to use the blockchain. I do think it has changed. I do think that the panorama for enterprise blockchain has changed. I remember that at the beginning there was a lot of promise. I think still there is a lot of promise on using blockchain for specific use cases, but it did.
Yeah, so I think it'd be good to share your experience with that since you've been involved with so many projects, more so on the technology side, right? You've been helping companies implement this technology. And you mentioned some of the differentiating features but maybe you can just explain some of the use cases that you've helped companies try to deliver products or services in, and maybe some lessons in the various categories of business. You have maybe some examples like you can share? Be interested
Sure.
to know.
Sure. I think that the moment you try to sell a product saying blockchain, that is a red flag. Like you should be able to articulate the value of your product without saying blockchain. Or same thing for AI, for any buzzword, it should just be coherent. It should just make sense. Like, people should be like, yeah, that is a pain. That thing you're trying to sell me would solve the problem. So just a thought on when we think that's valuable. And we're picky on who we want to work with because we want to have solid partners that continue to grow, and then we grow with them. Like one very cool use case was from a company called Afloat that was founded by a CPA called Luis. And the opportunity she saw is taxes. There are tax credits in the US, some other countries, but you get these credits because you have land that is not being developed and it has some environmental benefit, or there are a lot of other reasons, maybe a historical building. The moment you get this tax credit, you can use them, but you can also, if you use them and you still have some left, you can sell them. And these are usually pretty big deals that are done between large accounting firms, large companies that own a lot of land, or for some other reason, they end up with a lot of tax credits, energy companies, etc. And then they try to sell them in the market. But it is a very clunky process, and it ends up being handled by only yeah, very rich people or companies sell them and buy them. I think it would be great if a lot of people could just buy them in smaller chunks. And this is the opportunity that Luis saw. And what they did is they created a marketplace where you could sell fractional tax credits. So imagine that you're finishing your taxes in TurboTax, and at the end you can pay 90 cents, 80 cents for every dollar of tax credits that you have to pay to the government. Everybody would buy them, right? It's a product that everybody would buy. And having them fractionally sold helps you have sell them at a better price and reach markets that would not have access to them usually. So that is a very cool product that Float is building, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, some of the things that are missing here are like the process is very clunky, so fractionalizing these tax credits takes significant effort, and um, yeah, just people not being very used to most people don't even know this stuff because they are never really offered or in the market. But I think there's a use case that made sense with or without talking about blockchain, and blockchain was just the right technology. You can fractionalize tax rates, you can move them around, you can buy them, sell them, and once you use them, you can burn them. And right, it is the right technology for this. I think another use case. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what were the biggest challenges for implementing that particular solution? And I do think there are a lot of people that talk about fractionalizing, let's say real estate or something, and investing in that seems like at least on paper, this seems like a good idea. But what are the challenges when you try to do something like this and using blockchain technology? Is there anything you can maybe just share, like just some of the challenges in implementing such a thing?
Product, there were challenges just in the real world. How do you validate a tax credit? It's a process where you have to call someone and they have to tell you that it is valid and it hasn't been used. There's not a database that is doing this. There are challenges there, and there are also challenges, just like technical challenges. I think the biggest challenge in blockchain is just the UI and UX. It's getting a lot better, but when we started building this, just how do you get people that are non-crypto native to use a blockchain solution? So just making sure that they can sign in with emails and they can recover their accounts. I think that was part of the challenge. I think the other part of the challenge is how do you know the tax credit has been executed? And this company, I think they've sold 170K dollars worth of tax. So they've actually had volume. But I would say, yeah, the UI, the UX, and how do you protect against scams? Meaning once a tax credit is executed, it is burned, and how do you make sure that you're only selling tax credits that are valid? And the way they were doing it is really just they were the onboarding platform for tax credits, so they vetted every tax credit, put it in the marketplace, and then people could buy them.
So maybe it was just more the initial validation or just accepting tax credits for fractionalization. It's like they have to do some vetting. Otherwise, like some people would say they have tax credits, but may not be authentic. Yeah, there's a lot of real world, I think, issues even before the technology is even needed. You got to do a lot of things there. And yeah, like you mentioned, usability is a big issue if they have to do that, if they have to kind of store their keys, remember their passwords, and recovery and things like that. So seems like for enterprise solutions, I figure most people are not crypto savvy for the target audience that would buy something like this. Maybe, I'm not sure. Are their clients mostly crypto savvy, or were there just regular normal people that wanted some tax benefits?
Yeah, just people that wanted to save money in taxes. Yeah, the logging was a challenge.
Yeah.
And we've seen this in a few projects. I don't know what you have seen.
Yeah. UX, yeah, this is a problem for crypto in general. One of the biggest challenges. So I feel like a company can use this technology probably in the background and maybe on the user interface or the consumer facing application. Maybe you can not have to have them, use the technology. So you can maybe do some sort of hybrid custody or some sort of solution like that, especially if the audience is just regular retail. They have to learn extra things about it. If the pain point, if they want to save enough money, maybe you can validate the concept. But it's interesting. So they're doing volume. Is there any particular challenges or bottlenecks for this business? Are they growing, or is just overall it seems as though the size of the market is really big, and what's the status right now afloat?
I mean, I think it is a great idea. It's a product that if you can get to the hands of consumers, everyone would buy them, right? Every,
Uh-huh.
everybody would pay nine cents for every 10 cents of taxes that you owe. The problem is securing the credits, because and this is something that Luis shared. So to get $100,000 in tax credits, you have to know the person that is going to sell them, and the advantage for them is that you would get them maybe 5% more money than they're going to get if they just sell them to their other buddies and that they know. Now, the problem right now is the fractionalization. The big friction is that, right, they're happy to make more money if it's the same effort. The problem is that getting them to fractionalize the tax credit is a lot of work, because then they have to sign. So let's say that, yeah, they have $1 million in tax credits, and they want to chunk them in smaller chunks of even 5K, right? You don't even have to go to 1K, but even 5K requires a huge amount of paperwork for them. And the financial officer signing each one of these fractionalizations. And that seemed like a big headache for them. So right now they are waiting on the technology to get better on the government side to be able to do this more in a more agile way, because it is hard to fractionalize
I
the
see.
tax credit to the current
Yeah,
income
yeah.
rate.
So that, yeah, so every business has their kind of unique challenges there. So it's a lot of times it's not about the technology, it's just about understanding the business and the processes, and there's just other challenges even outside of the technology, it seems. So all right, so let's go on to, I'm just curious about use cases in general. Any other ones that are interesting you've helped companies with, and maybe like any lessons or stories about their challenges?
Yeah, we work with a company called Proxy. It was founded by very smart lawyers, super capable. They know their business very well, and they also love technology. And what they do is there's a lot of people outside the US with money that want to come and live in the US. And one of the ways to get it is through an EV5 investor visa. And this basically lets you, if you prove a lot of money. I think it's 1.8 million. And with that, you have to justify that your investment generated X amount of jobs. And if you do that, then you will get an investor visa, a green card. So what they do is they orchestrate the money that is held by the bank, that is investor money, and the developer, and how are they showing proof that they're making progress and that they're using the money wisely. How many jobs does that generate? There are these tables that say in New York, if you spend $100 million in construction, this is the equivalent of this many jobs. No, these tables exist. So they do all of these reports, and for them, stability was important or is important. They just want to make sure that the reporting is done right and it's trustworthy. So when they launch, we launch completely running on Polkadot, and yeah, the users, the investors, everyone had to go through the interface and have their private keys and all of that. Unfortunately, that was a very clunky process for the users, and at the end, we had to do a mix of Web3 and Web2, Web 2.5, where the users were able to log in with regular emails, never worry about keys, and we use the blockchain to hash transactions and just make sure that they can prove that they haven't been tampered with. This is a company that is growing crazy. They have, I think, $1 billion that they manage, and yeah, they continue to grow rapidly. So for us, the lesson there is that yes, the blockchain does solve a need. There are companies that want the reliability and trust that blockchain provides, but never at the cost of the user. But the business always comes first, and you need to be able to onboard and provide support and have customers that are happy and want to use the platform. And if the UI is not there yet, then it's not the right solution.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. I think similar, yeah, to what I mentioned with the previous one, is just a hybrid solution seems to be a good approach. Even using the immutability aspect internally seems to be effective, right? So that they can trust that like their systems internally are immutable and they don't have to worry about that. But then maybe once it goes to the consumer side, it's somehow with accounts, it's yeah, you don't need to have everybody keeping their own keys. That seems to be a huge obstacle. We'll get to Polkadot and the parachain. I think that's great to know more about that. But any more applications that are interesting or unique that you want to share? Any lessons around that?
I mean, I think DAOs, I'm still very excited about DAOs. At the beginning, it was really new idea. And we work with a team called Haifa, and they have a beautiful interface. They're really trying to do economies and things that benefit the world. That was a great product to work on. I think it was just interesting to see more that the kind of dynamics that happen when you're product ownership, accountability, things like that. But yeah, it's a good product that it's out there and it's working. And I think for us, the lesson there was again, yeah, focus. I think you need, even in DAOs, you need a clear ownership on products and good accountability. And yeah, again, focus on UI, UX. But they did focus more on crypto native people or people that have enough big incentives that they will adopt the technology, and they did well. Continue to grow and have a pretty cool product that helps you manage everything in the DAO, right? You launch it, you manage payments, you manage the treasury, you vote for proposals. And but yeah, that's just a more native project that was executed. But no, what do you think, June? Where do you see the opportunity? Because I think part of it, like the reality is that a lot of the initial ideas that we saw for blockchain, they haven't come to fruition. I think a lot of it is due to the UI, and it has gotten immensely better, and I think it's a lot better now. But the original vision has shifted, has changed. The interest for companies, I think, has changed. I don't know. What do you see?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar as on the enterprise side, but yeah, I do think that enterprise use cases are a little bit different than retail use cases. And even in retail, it's hard to find a massively successful application. And so we can highlight a few things, really the usability and having people having to manage their own keys. That's probably the biggest challenge. So whether it's enterprise or retail. I think that's definitely the biggest challenge. And I think we're getting close to solving that. But again, recovery is important. Like, how do you recover? Because WebAuthn is passwordless, and we implement that in our systems. But then we need a recovery system because you could lose your phone. You don't have to deal with passwords, which is actually better than Web 2, because passwords, people always lose their passwords. Right. But then you could also lose your phone. So if that happens, or even your computer, then you really need a recovery solution. So I think those are the areas that need to be completely solved. Web3 to be just as easy as Web2. And on the retail side, yeah, which I'm more familiar with, it's really Bitcoin as a digital gold is the killer use case for now. And stable coins, same thing, payments, and that's even used more so than Bitcoin. And then DeFi, there's a lot of DeFi, so it's more of an alternative financial system, not really tied to traditional systems. And so a lot of people with kind of a lot of the crypto wealth that they've gained over the years do move money, large amounts of money back and forth with DeFi. So I think that's another. And other than that, it's more exchanges make money, right? And they're not really decentralized, but it's all a lot of speculation, a lot of trading, and they're taking fees. But other than that, there's maybe some games that have potential and they've gotten users, but nothing that has gained the mainstream traction that I think people were hoping for earlier. And so then you're explaining the challenges of the enterprise side, and I think there's probably even more challenges, especially because of regulation, right? So you're having to go through a lot of legal hoops to make something work a lot of times, and trying to merge the digital with the physical. And one thing that's very popular these days is real world assets. I don't know if you've helped companies. I think the tax credits is an example of that. But there's a lot of legal paperwork that has to be done. I think there's potential. It's just more the legal side of things. But anyway, so yeah, those would be my thoughts. So yeah, it's like, yeah, let me know as you get more and more into, because you have a lot of experience with enterprise, and so yeah, I'd like to know. And what do you know of the legal side of things, like to let's say put real estate on the blockchain, right? Like you need a lot of paperwork in the real world that says, hey, there's some sort of contract that says this digital representation of that is tied to this asset here. And is that getting better? Is that easy? You do it with Tether and currency. And I know that there were other companies that were saying, yeah, you can do the same thing under trusts and just set up real estate or any other asset in there. So I think in theory it does work, but I think there's probably a lot more legal kind of paperwork that's required. What were your thoughts? Just those tax credits, for example, right? So what were the legal kind of maybe requirements to say that, hey, this can be used for other people, and having to prove that? Was it held in some sort of trust? Yeah, such that people can't reuse it, I guess. That's the other thing. You can't reuse your tax credits. Yeah.
This was done by Luis. She's super careful. She doesn't want to be in a gray area. Right? So everything was done by the book. And I think she talked to lawyers and made sure that everything was very, like there was a bank account that was only for this, and it was a trust to the because the money came in dollars in order to buy and sell the tax credits. But yeah, I think that it wasn't so much on the tokenization, but how do you make sure that the money is not used for something else? And it's really, yeah, that there is no confusion about who does the funds belong to and what did they purchase, and it cannot be stolen by the companies. That was done by Luis. The experience we have tokenizing real world asset is, so Max Gravit founder, he bought land in Wyoming, and then, but I think that doing it is easy. The problem is when you want to buy and sell it, right? When you want to do a business about it. But what he did is bought land, and then we register a company, a DAO LLC in Wyoming, which by law, the data on the blockchain can be taken to court, and then we distributed some tokens. So I have some tokens there, and he has tokens, and a couple more people have tokens there. And if I remember correctly, somebody from the Council of Wyoming replied to we put all of this in Twitter. And he said, yes, that's great, congrats. But basically, there is a DAO LLC company that owns the property, and this company is owned by token holders. And the token holders can go to court in Wyoming and be like, I have 30% of these tokens, and that gives me right of ownership of 30% of these 40 acres of land. So that was just interesting, going through the whole process and actually doing it and seeing the paperwork and just getting the validation from the right people on how that would work. I don't think that was particularly complicated. The property was paid in Bitcoin. Everything was done very digitally native. The problem is when let's say that we want to make a pool of X amount of money to participate in a real estate deal. I think the moment you're selling it, that's when you're selling it and it's only like friends and family, that's when you get into the securities problem. But tokenizing in a legal way, I don't think it's super complicated right now.
Yeah, that's a
Because
great
you have
case
people.
study. Yeah, that's a great case study. Just and you saw the entire process. It'd be good to sometime in the future maybe dig into how that was done, because I think it at least shows the potential of being able to do that. And yeah, in Wyoming, I'm not sure if it's just particular to Wyoming because they have these very favorable DAO laws, and maybe outside of that, you probably have to do a little bit more, right? But that's a great case study. We can see what if the laws become favorable to DAOs, can control assets like this. I think, yeah, there's a lot of potential. But then there's probably just also legal property rights. If you have just a minority interest in it, what does that mean? Do you still have maybe more rights to prevent a sale, or are you just dependent on the 51%? To dictate what happens, and so you have to sell like probably when you don't want to sometimes, right? So you're forced to sell. So there's just a lot of other kind of things to think about when you get into any kind of like joint ownership of an asset. In real estate, it's more common that you only have a few people, right? And there's different laws, like I think tenants in common, and you could get a lot more people involved. And I think even outside of blockchain, there was some guys that were trying to do like these fractionalization of real estate and crowdfunding of real estate too. So there's probably some things to think about there. But yeah, so that's great. So I'm glad you shared that. So let's move on to Polkadot and the parachain. What can you tell us about the Polkadot ecosystem? How's the parachain going? Maybe explain what a parachain is for those who might not know.
Yeah, so this is going to change, but the way it was and it still is now is that you had the main Polkadot, and then you had a few slots for parachains that were able to connect and be secured by the main blockchain. And the way you earn one of these slots is you have to bid, and there are these different bidding opportunities. And if you bid and you beat everyone else, then you get the chance to have a parachain that connects to. So we did that a couple of years ago, and we got Hash Network launched. And the vision behind Hash Network was to get all these partners that we had worked with, and they were really blockchain agnostic. They just wanted to be the best solution that we could recommend and execute. And Polkadot seemed like a good opportunity, like a truly decentralized. So we launched there. We were lucky enough by support from the community and a couple of investors that they supported they didn't invest in Hash Network directly. They supported the parachain option. And yeah, we got a few grants to build products like native Bitcoin. We were already looking at how can you use the Polkadot infrastructure to build a solution to coordinate payments and custody for Bitcoin. That idea then evolved into smart vaults, and we built. And yeah, I think we got some good advisors, and we're still working with them and trying to launch the token. But yeah, I think that so what we like about Polkadot is how they truly decentralized. I think they're really trying to live the promise of blockchain, open governance. The community is good. They're smart and knowledgeable people. And I think what has been a challenge is just again the UI. It got a lot better in the last few months, but when we started onboarding customers, we were using the Polkadot JS. It was just very clunky. But yeah, it's been a journey, and we're still there.
Yeah, it's great to know. How many parachain slots are there? I'm just I forget the number. So.
Maybe I would say somewhere around 50.
Okay, 15. Okay. And then you also mentioned smart vaults as the custody solution, which we spoke about the importance of custody. And so are you using Polkadot for that, or is that a separate kind of project? I know it's a Bitcoin smart vault, right? Is that the
Right.
same thing?
No, smart vault something else. So
Mm.
smart vaults, the idea there was using Nostr for because you don't need tokenomics for everything. There are a lot of solutions that you do want decentralization, but maybe you don't want tokenomics. So the idea was to use Nostr for identity, so you knew who you were talking to, and maybe you wanted to create a multi-sig account with some of your Nostr friends for your project, and then you created multi-sig where you could, message, hey, I'm going to pay this, and then you send a request, and everybody signs or discusses that in the application, and then just send the payment in Bitcoin. And there are some advantages of using Nostr and Bitcoin. They say they share the same cryptography. Both are decentralized, and they share a lot of the same users. That was the idea. Also wanted to leverage Taproot miniscript, which is like smart Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto always wanted Bitcoin to be programmable. It's proof in code, and I think he just didn't get a chance to finish that. And it's just very hard to use Bitcoin script, and that's why miniscript was invented so that you could. There's I think 7. If I remember correctly, 7 of the outputs be used. There are some that just break the transaction. Anyways, it's a whole mess that was solved by miniscript. But the advantages of miniscript is that I could create a multi-sig and then write a condition that maybe in 2 years someone else should be able to move. Like you can have a backup key, or you can give someone else a backup key that becomes active only after X amount of time. So that makes it very recoverable. I was talking to my dad about Bitcoin the other day. He was excited. He wants to buy Bitcoin. He actually just bought recently. And when I explained him about the keys, he was like, that seems worrisome, right? If I'm going to buy an interesting amount of Bitcoin and then I just lose my keys, does that mean that I just lose everything? I was like, yeah. He's like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I explained to him about these smart vaults that we're building. And he was like, yeah, I would do that. If I lose my keys and then you are at the backup and maybe then we have another backup, that they cannot move my funds right now, but they can only move them if I lose my keys, then that would be great. So yeah, that's smart vaults. It's just how do you self-custody your Bitcoin so somebody like FTX cannot steal it, but you also are a big threat, right? I think 25% of all Bitcoin has been lost by the owners. That's including 20%. That's including Satoshi Nakamoto's locked Bitcoin, but it's a huge chunk, right? Every day, even very competent people have lost their keys. So the idea was, how can you protect Bitcoin from others and from yourself through more recoverable?
Yeah, that's I think one of the biggest problems with Bitcoin, and there's other solutions like with multi-sig type solutions, and so this seems like a good approach. So when you spoke to your father, what did you tell him? So if like how would it work? So instead of depending on yourself, you still have the keys, but let's say if you lose it, you lose the password. Let's say that you just wrote down somewhere and put it in a safe somewhere. Like how would it work with your solution? Your smart vault, would you sign up with a company to say, okay, they're going to be a backup? Is that how it works? Or yeah, what's the user experience like for the smart vault?
So we're still working on the key agents, but the idea is that you can have, I think the 2 of 3 makes a lot of sense, and it's been thought through well by a lot of companies like OnChain and Swan and Casa. I think what we want to do and what we're doing is just to add more intelligence into that 2 of 3. More intelligence, it's maybe not the word, more redundancy, right? So you still have a 2 of 3, right? Ideally, you have your key, maybe your lawyer has your key, and a more active key agent has your key, and you need a 2 of 3 to move it. So if you want to move your money, you just tell the service provider, hey, I'm going to send this, and as long as you haven't shown that you have lost your keys or you have notified that you've lost your key, you can get them out. You can get your Bitcoin out. But then if you lose your keys, they can help you recover it. I think one of the key advantages of a solution like smart vaults for that scenario is that if one of these service providers are doing a 2 of 3 and they hold two keys, they can move your Bitcoin without your permission. They would, it's very unlikely they would do it, but technically they can do it. With a solution like ours, we would program your address so that it requires your signature. It's a 2 of 3 with an additional condition that you have to sign. But it has that condition maybe for 2 years. And then you say, maybe if I lose my key, I have another backup key that I can use. And if that doesn't work, then they can actually help me recover my Bitcoin. So you can do a lot of, you can get very creative on how and when your Bitcoin is used. So in the case of my dad really was a social recovery use case. So my dad was like, okay, let's have 3 keys. If I lose my key, I want you guys to be able to move my Bitcoin maybe in X amount of time. You need that time lock in order for the other keys to become valid.
Gotcha. And that makes sense too. It gives you more flexibility. You could also even do 2 of, let's say, 5, right? And have the other 2 keys only be functional after a certain amount of time, so that if for whatever reason all 3 people, like you and the 2 custodians, disappear, then you have these backups that can maybe after 2 years. So the flexibility definitely seems to be, I think, yeah, really valuable. So miniscript hasn't been talked about a lot. How does it compare? Can you do fully functional layer 2 technology using miniscript, or is it just maybe specific to just multisig and those kind of maybe certain functionality, or does it, can you go even more broad?
What do you mean?
So like, can you create a smart contract platform using
No.
okay
So miniscript is really just, if I remember correctly, there are like 270 codes. I don't want to
opcode?
mess this there. But really what miniscripts helps you do is just to, it's very easy to make a mistake using Bitcoin script. So what it helps you do is just put them, if you use miniscript, you will not mess up the logic that you're trying to do. And it's a lot easier to read. So yeah, that is the objective of miniscript is to do that. So it is only focused on, you cannot do a smart contract. There are a few levers that you can use and it's, there are very powerful levers. I think the biggest advantage is that it's you're skin to skin with Bitcoin. There is no, it's not like MPC, right? That you have an additional layer of logic. Here you really are skin with Bitcoin. And to your example, you can have a very large multi-sig and you can have a decaying multi-sig as well, right? Maybe you have a 3 of 5, but then after a year you need only 2 of 5 and then you only need 1 of 5. So you can do a lot of things with miniscript, but people don't want to experiment. They don't want to have fun with how their wealth is custodied, right? They want to have very reliable and proven solutions. The original idea for smart is for smart vaults, and I still think this will happen. We're just a little early. Is that if you want to operationalize Bitcoin for a company, let's say that they're paying their suppliers, or and you need to move big amounts, then you want to have a kind of, that's where maybe the CEO approves it and one of your VPs or your treasurer. The company, big companies do this. When they move $100 million between accounts, they, not between their accounts, but for payments, they have to coordinate the payment with other officers of their companies. And smart vaults would help you do this. But the challenge with smart vaults has been, how do we simplify this enough so that it makes sense for people to use it? It's right now, it's open source and it's free, and we're getting some traction and going to a few events to promote it and talk about it. But we think it can be useful for communities and different kinds of groups. But yeah, I don't know. I think I just rambled and didn't answer your question.
No, that's good. It's great. And I think probably the institutional side, as you mentioned, where there's executives that you just need to use multisig to move large amounts of money. As institutions go into Bitcoin ETFs and things like that, I think more and more institutions are going to have to be able to handle their own Bitcoin. So I could see that being a good solution, a good safe solution to use. But that's great. And custody is, again, one of the most, I think, critical parts of just are one of the biggest challenges we need to solve even in Bitcoin. Let's end on Polkadot. I just want to dig in last few bits to see what the latest is going on. Now, does Hashed have its own, as a parachain, its own token? Do you guys have a token? Okay. And
We do have a token.
Okay, great. And then what's the vision or the future? What kind of applications are you trying to attract and build? And yeah, what's the strategic vision? Is there also, you must control it with a DAO sort of governance where all the hashed token holders get to decide on the strategy?
One of the advantages of Polkadot is that it already comes with a lot of these. So yeah, it's governed by the token holders, how the tokens are used. So the use case for Hash was, or is, how do you get companies to use the blockchain in a way that benefits them not only now, but benefits them as the blockchain grows? So we saw this problem in a few of the projects that we built before, where right, the token went up 10% from one week to the next, and now they had to pay 10% more to run. And that just seems like a silly, just like a adoption resistant mechanism that doesn't make a lot of sense. So one of the things that we thought very early on about Hash was we wanted companies to pay for their transaction in Hash, but USD denominated. They want to have a stable and predictable expense, and then we use that USD and burn Hash with it. So as adoption grows and there is more and more demand, without impacting the companies that are running in Hash, the token holders would benefit. And a lot of the token holders are companies that launch with us. So Afloat has tokens and Proxy has tokens, and other companies that launch with us have tokens, right? We want them to own the tokens, to control the inflation, to control how much is distributed. The idea is that it's a consortium of enterprise blockchain companies that help themselves and also help drive adoption in the space. So that is the vision of Hash Network. Like, how do you have a token that truly has a reason to exist beyond speculation? And how do you help this token distribute the cost? How do you help through this token distribute the cost of compute and securing the blockchain and having immutable data and having on-off ramps to set and banking? Like, once you build this once in the parachain, everybody can use it. A consortium of companies that can build on chain and benefit from shared infrastructure. That's the vision for Hash Network.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic to hear about. I really like the tokenomics. It's something we've thought about for the tokenomics for our systems, and the idea that you can burn tokens, as I think you've mentioned, through cash flow that's generated, or I
Yeah.
think that's great. That's great. That makes economic sense to me, that there is there's kind of a precise tokenomics that it will enable the token to actually appreciate when there's actually more business activity. And to me, that's probably the best model. Like, kind of what I considered is like a buyback, a share buyback. You're using cash flow that you generate to buy back your shares, and your shares appreciate. And the same thing with tokens. If you're generating a lot of cash flow, you buy back the tokens, you buy back or burn hashed, in this case, hash tokens, and it should appreciate, right? But it really depends on, like, and it incentivizes people to really generate a solid business rather than base it on speculation. So that's good. I'm glad that you guys have that kind of tokenomics, and I think we need more of that. Most tokenomics don't even have any kind of relation to the economics. They're either governance tokens or speculative tokens.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
Some of the speculative tokens are the most successful ones. Tokens.
Yeah, but I think eventually that will change, and things like your things where you have proper tokenomics will eventually be more sustainable.
Should be.
Yeah. And all value, it is like the idea that, and people, it's not only the current cash flows, but potential future cash flows. But it's funny, in this space, there's not even that. It's just pure like speculation on future speculation almost. But I do think that's just unsustainable in the long run when you have it. But yeah, really appreciate it. It's good to learn more about it. We'll have you back to give us updates on Hashed and the Polkadot ecosystem, and get into other learnings from you. And so you have quite a number of projects. The Smart Vault seems to be very interesting, and look forward to getting more updates on your journey in crypto. So really appreciate having you. Any last piece of advice or anything you want to share?
No, if anybody wants to check out Smart Vaults, we'd love to help you on board and try it. That's it. And thanks for having me. You're working on very cool projects. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good. And it's smartvaults.com?
.io.
.io. Okay, SmartVault.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. And what about Hashed? How do people learn about
Hash.io.
Hash.io. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds good, Augusto. Yeah, really appreciate it, and we'll have you back. So I hope you have a good weekend.
You too. Have a good weekend.